And it's great to see so many folks here. Thank you for being here. This is a really important topic, and it's one that I think we need to address carefully because it involves a certain element of fear and distrust and things that can be disempowering. And we need to find a balance usually when we talk about stuff like that, to the point that we are educating ourselves and holding ourselves accountable to best practices, yet without sort of scaring ourselves into submission or to inaction. And so it's important to talk about and to feel comfortable about, and to just kind of take things, as they come, and just be open to learning and working and pushing and just being brave. So thank you for being brave and being part of this. The title is Security Culture 101. Are you working for police directly or by accident? So hopefully the answer to those questions is no, like you're not working for the police at all. And just to be clear, I guess the title says police, but really for the purposes of this talk, we're talking about like adversaries. So maybe instead of police, it could say FBI, or maybe it could say industry, operatives or anything like that. So what we'll do is I'll try to go over some different examples of ways that the state or the industry do work to try to stop us from doing what we do, and identify some different motivations people might have of that historically, and then finish up with three really kind of key ways that we can do our best to practice the best security culture to minimize the chances that we are, actively working or supporting with somebody who's trying to harm, this kind of work, or that we're just sort of accidentally, contributing to some of the things that they do anyway. So with that, we'll jump right into it with this photo. Sorry, it's a kind of grainy photo, but it's a really famous photo from the Memphis sanitation strikes. Workers in Memphis were Black workers, and the sanitation teams had some of the worst conditions you can imagine. So very little money, and at one point there was like a really bad rainstorm. A couple of the workers who didn't even have a home because they couldn't afford it because of the pay was so low, they took shelter from the rain in an unused garbage truck and ended up being killed. And that was sort of the trigger moment where the workers said, hey, this is enough. We can't even survive. We're going to go on strike. We're not picking up Memphis's trash. We're going to march every day. And like direct action often does, it yielded results. And but it's a famous photograph. Another photograph from the same photographer is this photo of Martin Luther King Jr. These are by photographer Ernest Withers. Ernest Withers is, when he passed away, was known as just this wonderful photographer and documentarian of the civil rights movement. He was at the trial for Emmett Till. He was with Dr. King in the hotel the day that Dr. King was executed. And people really appreciated his work and his documentation, his participation in the movement, until years after his death, when it came to light that he was actually an informant with the FBI. He had been going to these events. He worked as he worked on the police team initially, just openly as a photographer, and developed a pretty impressive resume of photography. And the civil rights movement sort of attracted him over to document them. And he just, played the role that he played. And it wasn't until much later that people realized, like, oh, he's also giving the FBI license plate numbers of activists or inside information. And no one really knows like all the details about these kind of things. When people do FOIA requests and get a lot of information, the FBI blocks a lot of things out. And also, it's fair to say maybe we can't trust the FBI when they are handing over information. They're definitely known to use disinformation campaigns. But it's just an example of an informant who people felt great about all along for years, but little did anyone know they were just helping along. Their motivation allegedly was just simply money. They were getting paid by the FBI to do this, and a lot of people question, like, well, maybe he gave bad information. We don't know, but they were clearly working together. So it's one thing to be aware of. Another kind of way that people will try to impede work would be through what's known as like an agent provocateur. That is somebody who either from the state or from an industry comes into a movement, not with the intent to observe, sort of like Withers did with sending information, but to actually disrupt and change the course of things and turn things into a direction, typically a violent direction, that the state or the industry believes will work out bad for the activists and their cause. So when we talk about direct action, what we think of that as is challenging injustice. And there's a lot of injustice in the world. And sometimes when you challenge it, it's just this injustice that happens kind of organically, and you can challenge it and you're not going to face, repression for doing so. But a lot of injustice also benefits somebody else or some other entities. And they'll often work really hard and do really unscrupulous things to hold on to the power and the positions they have, including what SeaWorld did. So PETA had a campaign against SeaWorld for their cruel treatment of orcas. And so SeaWorld said, hey, let's just hire this person and they can go and start going to these PETA protests. And they did. And once they got there, they started suggesting things like, fires and vandalism and violence. And eventually, PETA thought that was like suspicious, and they looked into it and confirmed that, yeah, it was in fact a SeaWorld employee. Another example of such a thing would be somebody who, this is in the UK, police entered Animal Liberation Front by just sending people in, and one way that they got involved was just by sleeping with people. That's a very common tactic, is to just gain people's confidence by befriending them in an actual sexual relationship. And this is a story of a police officer who was exposed years later, and a woman was essentially raped to the extent that she had sex with somebody and had a relationship with somebody founded on the principles that this is an activist who like shares my morals and my values, and they have this totally other name. And then you find out years later, it was actually a cop who was just trying to get into your organization to mess things up. My screen down here. The special branch officer was one of a group of police spies in a covert unit who had been infiltrating, disrupting the activities of political campaigns across Britain for decades. So this is an extremely prevalent thing that happens a lot. Another type of way that somebody could be an informant and way that they might work with you is not that they start with ill intentions or anything like that. They could be somebody who gets caught up in a situation, and then it's to their benefit to turn against you and to cooperate with law enforcement. And this is a photo of current rap star Tekashi 6ix9ine. Tekashi 6ix9ine got involved with Trey 9 Blood's gang some years ago because he was sort of embroiled in different conflicts in the rap game, and there were different people he had problems with, had supports from other gangs, and there's sometimes like this idea of clout that comes along with being associated with a gang. So people, felt like he might have exploited this gang by, sort of getting involved with them, putting them in his videos and befriending them and giving them money for his benefit. And then later it sort of came back on him because they started exploiting him too. He was even, partially kidnapped one time for some ransom. And it was like a really unhealthy relationship between all these people. And then they all got caught up doing these crimes. And Tekashi 6ix9ine actually had, pled guilty previously to the use of a child and a sex performance, because he posted videos of a 13-year-old when he and another man were 19, and there was sex on that, and he's registered sex offender. And so now suddenly, with that background that he has, the idea of going to prison for a long time becomes actually very life-threatening potentially. People could be known as a chomo in jail if they're a child molester or have some kind of charge with kids like that. So he's scared to death of going to jail. And so he's like, all right, I'm just going to snitch. There's a speciesist term for it. People call it rat. We don't like to call people rats because we love rats and we don't want to use animals as insults for anybody. But he's certainly what you would call a snitch. He went on the stand and just to get out of his own trouble that he got himself into, essentially, he gave up everybody else. And so his motivation was like a mostly selfish one. And he's out free now, making, millions of dollars. So then this is another example of a way somebody can get sort of tried to be pulled in to the efforts of our adversaries. And this person, resisted it, but it arguably cost her life. So this is Jean Seberg, and she was a famous actress in the 60s. And from a young age, even as young as 14, she was really appreciative of social justice movements. She was a donator and a supporter to NAACP. And when the Black Panthers came along, she was really impressed by what they were trying to do in Oakland and other communities as far as like building up systems of support for Black people who were facing so much injustice. And so she wanted to help. She donated $10,000, and she would start to go and show up at events and give support. And one of the Black Panthers noted that to date, before Jean was involved, that they were getting press for having guns and for a tactic they would do where they would quote unquote police the police. California at the time, the Black Panthers were legally allowed to carry rifles around in the open and just follow police, documenting them to make sure that they weren't killing Black people. And it was very controversial, and they enacted a law to change it to make it illegal for them to do that. And but they noted that, like, because they had this kind of catchy tactic that also brought with it a lot of troubles, they were able to get press and get attention. And then they noted that when Jean would come to protest, they would get press and attention just because she showed up, or because she got a haircut, or she said something. It sort of shows that this celebrity culture obsession that we have today still, was in place back then. But the Panthers weren't the only ones who noticed this. The FBI noticed this as well. And at the time, the COINTELPRO program, which is counterintelligence program, which was an FBI program to just smear, destroy, hurt the reputation of activists who were gaining steam and momentum, and they decided to apply it to Jean as well. And so the FBI sent a memo. They had an informant in the Black Panthers who notified them that Jean was pregnant, but other people didn't know. She had a boyfriend or husband at the time, but was also at least in a relationship with another member of the Panthers. And I don't think people knew who the father was or anything, but the FBI said, oh, this is just a great opportunity. Let's please send letters to the Hollywood, California gossip columnist publications to let them know that Jean is pregnant by a member of the Black Panthers, because this is the 60s, and it's like a time when it would have like been devastating to her career. And this was just the beginning of like a really long battle where the FBI would tap her phones, harass her in general, and she ended up committing suicide at the age of 40. The child was born prematurely and died a couple of days later, and she blames the FBI for that, because she said that the stress that she endured of essentially being stalked relentlessly by the FBI just drove her to such high stress levels that she had a premature birth that didn't work out. And she resisted the FBI and never joined, but this is the lengths that they went to try to recruit her. And now back onto the Black Panthers and back to our sort of overall idea of, are you working for the police on purpose or by accident? Sometimes we don't know those answers about others till later on. So this is Richard Aoki, who was a Bay Area, Berkeley, absolute legend in social justice, direct action, organizing, bringing communities together. The only high-ranking member of the Black Panthers who was not Black. He was Asian. He was of Japanese descent. He lived in an internment camp in Utah as a child, and overcame all of that, and was just an absolute hero and legend. When he passed away in the Bay, they had a massive funeral for him on campus with hundreds of people, and all the accolades you can imagine for his like amazing work that he contributed to so many movements. And again, after his suicide, it was through FOIA requests, 4,000 pages of documents showed that from 1961 to 1977, he was an FBI informant and was monitoring dozens and dozens of activists in different groups at a time and giving information to the FBI. The question is like, to what extent, and was he monitoring, or was he actually advancing the issues for them and being like an agent provocateur? Because the Black Panthers, for all the successes they had and for maybe some of the notoriety that came from some of their activity with guns, guns and violence ended up being what, sort of wiped them out with, of course, a lot of help from FBI and different agencies. But they put leaders in jail for shootings and for gun charges. Some leaders, admitted that some people who used guns weren't even disciplined enough to use them the way that they wanted them to, and they committed crimes with them. And it was a big part of the downfall of an organization. And Richard was the first person to give the Black Panthers guns. He introduced guns to them by giving them his personal collection. He was a patriotic person, growing up, and that is why the FBI targeted him. The FBI in Berkeley were surveilling a family who were known communists, and Richard went to school with their son. The FBI listened to the phone calls and heard that Richard was like this anti-communist person in high school, and they made note of that. And then when he went to the military the next year, they reached out to him and said, hey, you should work with the FBI and do this and that and help us out. And he did that and just reported for years and years. And then people do theorized that maybe by the time he got involved with the Panthers, that he sort of turned on the FBI a bit and was still giving them information, but maybe not the most useful information, or maybe even deceptive information. It's hard to tell because so much is blocked out. But that poses the question that whether Richard gave the Black Panthers guns and instructed them to use guns, if he did that because the FBI said, "Hey, do this because it'll help them unravel later," or if he did it with good intentions, and it just worked out that way, it doesn't really matter because he ended up helping the police in a way, arguably by some folks' standards, whether it was his intention or whether he was, doing what he thought was right. And when the news came out about Richard, like, people didn't believe it whatsoever. The journalist who broke the story was like smeared and attacked because he was just so well loved, and it took like a second round of FOIA requests to really show so much more evidence that this was happening for people to really be like, wow, okay, And even then, though, still people do question at what point was he a genuine informant trying to take people down, or was he just in a position that he felt like he couldn't get out of? These are just some examples. In 1962, he was reporting on 75 subjects in the Young Socialist Alliance and Socialist Worker Party. He rose to leadership in the Vietnam Day Committee and was, reporting to the FBI that whole time. And then, yeah, like experts just agreed that his information was crucial, and the FBI knowing what they knew about the Black Panthers at least. And then we touch on, again, just the idea that if Aoki played a role in COINTELPRO, maybe he didn't even know it, but regardless, he helped serve that end for them. And I've given examples that have been mostly historic. The Tekashi 69 example is pretty new, but I don't want to give the impression that this is something that doesn't happen. The COINTELPRO program has technically been dismantled and illegal, but there's no shortage of evidence that FBI and different agencies are all working really hard to serve their interests, and I would like to think that our interests actually align with everyone's interests. Like, I think the values that this group upholds really benefits and moves towards like the best world for everybody. And but unfortunately, like, that's not what everyone's going to think, and there's going to be entities like Smithfield Foods or Amazon or Whole Foods or just entire industries that are and not in a position to fare well through great social change that we're trying to create. So we can just expect a lot of that. And with that in mind, that brings us to like the things that we can do. And so there's like a meme that goes around. It's like people say like my FBI guy or my FBI agent, because there's like agents are all genders. And this would be like the idea that the FBI is watching you, whether you're an activist or not. And me posing for the government, watching through my webcam, or my FBI agent when he sees me make other plans for September 20th or the global climate strike. And so these are just like fun memes, but in reality, like some of us do have an FBI guy. Like I know my FBI guy because I've seen my like discovery in different cases. So, Special Agent Anderson, like maybe you'll see this video. I don't know. Hello. As I love you as a person and your family and want the best for everybody. I think it's really messed up if you're trying to derail this movement that's working for a really just cause. And I invite you or anybody on this call who happens to be, working against this to try to reach out and talk, because there are opportunities to, maybe Richard Aoki was flipped at some point, and we'd love to talk to you too. And so we are a group that doesn't talk to police in general. But I'm a police liaison, and I'd certainly make an exception if anybody felt like they were an infiltrator and wanted to come forward and share that. And we have heard people talk to us and let us know as recently as this year that the FBI contacted them in relation to investigations and work that Direct Action Everywhere has done, and asked if they ever see illicit drug use in the organization. And they want to know about the sale of drugs. And that's not something that we ever, are touching or whatever, but the FBI is asking people, hey, do you know about drug use in Direct Action Everywhere? And just, be aware. So like, Agent Anderson, I don't know if that's you asking that question or someone else's FBI guy, but, listen up, because we're not all about that. So the first thing that we can do to try to help our own security culture and how we act and minimize the chances that we're helping someone who is working against us or ourselves, you know, sort of filling that role accidentally, is just our lifestyle as it relates to sex, drugs, alcohol, things like this. All these things are things that on their own can be completely awesome, great things for people in different ways. You know, sex is a positive thing between consenting adults. You know, people can enjoy alcohol responsibly in ways, or drugs too. Drugs can be therapeutic to people in ways. But they're also all different ways that the industry or the state will try to manipulate your people into things. So this person on the right here is at an organizing meeting for No DAPL organizers trying to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline. And they're known in the community as somebody who does always offer to buy people alcohol and can provide hotel rooms to people who are in need sometimes, give folks rides. But as we always find out with this stuff later, they're actually an employee for Tiger Swan, a private security firm hired by the oil industry to try to disrupt and report on the No DAPL movement. And their story was covered in The Intercept. They'd been sent to collect information from the protesters, explicitly targeting those who were down on their luck. So we need to watch out. Like if we feel like we're down on our luck and someone's trying to help us out, that's probably because it's somebody awesome who just wants to help you out. But keep in mind that there could be another motive there, you know, and especially if there's things like alcohol that might help you talk a little more comfortably, or sex that could put you in a precarious position or create some jealousy or something like that. This actual infiltrator tried to get into multiple groups. One group had a no drug and alcohol policy, and no one trusted this guy because that was his MO. And so he didn't really end up being effective in that case, but eventually he did find other people in the movement and use them to against no DAPL movement. The next thing we can think about beyond those things is security culture. So I went out and found the most generic internet photo of security culture. And this is, I mean, data security, sorry. So this is a real basic thing. I think most of this talk, we like to talk about like how we act and how we think, but it is really important to just think about our devices. So like I have this Bluetooth headphone. If it's turned on, it's essentially a microphone. It's not hard to get warrants for your phone to see where you're at. It's not hard to get warrants at all for to ask Facebook or Google to hand over all your stuff. I talked about like Special Agent Anderson being my FBI guy. I've also know that my FBI guy has a big old list of my Facebook messages. So like when people reach out to me on Facebook Messenger, I'm usually just like, hey, I don't talk on Messenger. So hit me on WhatsApp or Signal. And not that those things are going to be perfect either. You know, if I have Signal, yet I have on my phone, the passcode allows me to just put my face in front of my phone, well, then the police could just hold my phone over my face while I'm handcuffed and be right in there to all my Signal messages too. So this talk isn't all about the details of that. That's a whole other thing. I definitely encourage folks to seek out the newest, most relevant information on data security. And I assume we'll have trainings about this in the future as we have in the past. But I just want to put that out there on people's radar. And then lastly, and this is, I think, the most important thing, is, oh, I forgot, this was a data security photo. One little thing we do is that groups of us who before the pandemic would, meet at ARC and work during the day. If you walked away from your computer with your laptop open and unlocked, we'd go in your messages and just say like, hey, y'all, FYI, I pooped my pants today, or something like that, just to embarrass somebody. So I don't even know why I'm just making this face, but it reminds me of somebody who, Matthew McKeefe, just got in your computer and embarrassed you. So yeah, close your laptop when you walk away, stuff like that. But on to what I want to say is the most important thing, and that's just how we treat each other. So the things that agent provocateurs do that could go in and cause like internal interpersonal conflict that can be just devastating to movements, as much as they do that and as hard as they work to do that, we probably do it to ourselves for free without trying more often. And it really does not matter if somebody is acting in ways that just destroy a community and disempower people, if they are doing it because the FBI is instructing them to do it, or they're doing it because that's just how we treat each other like crap sometimes. Us human beings, we do that, a lot of us. So whether it's on purpose or on accident, it has the same exact effect, really. Honestly, at least if it was the FBI directing, maybe we could discover that through FOIA and mobilize some support and some sympathy out of that. When we just do it to ourselves because we're not being mindful of taking care of each other and upholding good values, then it's just really poor, because people are taking a lot of risks. And just as an example of ways to do that, we have 5 key values, and here's 2 of them. And I'm just going to read through them really quick. One is that we're fiercely nonviolent. We directly challenge systems of oppression with power of nonviolence. We have empathy for individuals caught up in violent systems, like Agent Anderson, and we're seeking to bring them to the side of truth and justice. We accept suffering without retaliation for the sake of the cause, and even when tested, we respond nonviolently and act word and tone. And the second one is more applicable to what we're talking about right here, and that's that we build purposeful communities. We foster inclusive communities that empower, support, and build up our fellow activists. It's everyone's responsibility to treat each person in our community with warmth and respect. We assume good faith. We don't gossip, and we call each other in and not out. Our community is the foundation upon which we'll grow. And I can't read the bottom part because your photos are there, but the part I want to go back to is just that we want to be warm, we want to be respectful, we want to assume good faith, we want to call each other in and not out, because the gossiping, all this kind of stuff, they're just really really textbook tools that our adversaries will use against us, and we can put up defenses to those tools just by refusing to use those tools ourselves. So, my friend Orlando told me one time, he's like, if I hear somebody gossiping about somebody else to me, the first thing I want to do is just be like, oh, hold on. Since we're talking about Almira, let me just call Almira up right now so we can make this like a 3-way conversation, so that we're being sure to not talk behind her back. Now that's a bit extreme. It's fair to bring concerns to people and get feedback. But it is important that if we're ever talking about somebody behind their back and trying to get feedback for them, and we do it without them present the first time because we want to see if someone else resonates with what we're saying or something, it's really important to loop that person in as soon as possible. Because if not, then you're essentially just kind of talking about them behind their back, and maybe it's for a good reason, or maybe it's because you're an informant. But either way, it's probably going to be bad for the community. So. And it even applies when we talk about calling people out. Like, snitch jacketing is a term I just want to put out there really quick too. And I talked about Richard Aoki. Some people would say that like Richard actually switched and was actually acting in good faith after he joined the Panthers, and that now the FBI is just snitch jacketing him to create fear in communities of infiltrators. So sometimes, while we're talking about being really mindful of infiltrators, don't fall into a trap of assuming people are, or telling other people they are, because that's a whole other thing that's common too. And the reason we do all of this is because we're fighting for a cause that we really believe in. We're fighting for justice. This photo shows people taking action, disrupting an event where someone's body is being literally destroyed and mauled on stage to an audience that thinks it's amazing and it's fun. And these people are speaking up against that, against this super powerful industry and this super entrenched cultural norm. And we're going to face so much repression in so many different ways. And it's just easy to get disempowered. It's hard to mobilize. We've got a pandemic happening now. We're risking our freedom. We're risking reputations and jobs. And so if we're taking all those risks and fighting for a cause that's just so important and impacts so many people around the world, we just really owe it to all of ourselves to respect each other as much as we can and take the actions that we can that protect everybody's security, that we're not acting in ways that jeopardize others' safety, and just always keeping our mind on that. We'll never be perfect, but if we really think with a security culture mindset, we'll minimize the exposures that we have, or the times that we're actually contributing and doing the industry's work for us. And yeah, that's about it. So I'll open it up to questions now, either about this